Thank you, Dave. So it just occurred to me as Dave was speaking that I'm pretty sure that was the first time that I heard the Dean campaign mentioned. And for those of you who remember past PDFs, we actually would play a version of PDF bingo, and there were certain people and phrases, Clay Shirky, you know, and he hasn't been mentioned that much from the stage either, though he was sitting here earlier, and it's always great to have him. So that's interesting. That means we're moving into a new time, and you know, we're not just looking back, we're looking ahead. But we do cherish the wisdom that comes from people who worked on campaigns like the Dean campaign. And we always check in with folks like our next speaker, Zephyr Teachout, who now teaches law at Fordham University here, just to see what's on your mind. What would you like to bring to the PDF community? And since this last series of talks is really all provocations and proposals for the future, what Zephyr said she wanted to talk about is this curious thing that the internet is doing to a very old piece of American law, the First Amendment and freedom of the press. Because now the question is, what is the press? So Zephyr is going to take us into that. Thank you, Zephyr.
Yeah, so that's basically my talk. Now, I was so pleased that Mika invited me because I actually do not have a theory today. I have a puzzle. And there are a lot of really smart technologists and organizers here, and I'd like to get people thinking about this puzzle. But before I get to the puzzle, I want to just talk briefly about two things that I think are happening. One is that in the last, depending on your scope, 30 to 90 years, we've seen a real rise of the First Amendment and a real kind of dominance, that when you go to the Supreme Court, the First Amendment has become an amendment first among equals in some ways. If you want to make a strong argument, you want the First Amendment on your side. So it was used recently to strike down laws limiting minors' access to violent video games. It's used to slow public food and health perspectives, and it's most notoriously been used to strike down laws and campaign finance. As a good friend of mine from Texas says, it seems like the Supreme Court has went and gotten drunk on the First Amendment. So you have this sort of rise of the First Amendment, which many people in the technology community really sort of emotionally react to. You know, there's this sense of speech and the power and importance of free, uncensored speech. And at the same time, you have technology really changing the meaning of what is the nature of speech itself and press. So you have a First Amendment with the words of speech and press. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech and press. And then you have technology which is sort of moving in there and making press perhaps an empty set. So press has meant very different things over different times. But there's always been some sense of a difference between press and not press, where the press gets certain protections. So in the 18th century, press is the press itself, and not press is a horse, or not press is a school. And in the 19th century, press is press creating some kind of newspaper, and not press is a matchmaker, and not press is a coal company. And then in the 20th century, we have press is Walter Cronkite, and not press is Bank of America. So that when you then look at journalist shield laws or protections from seditious libel laws and their encroachment, you say, okay, Walter Cronkite gets these protections and Bank of America does not. And then in the early 20th century, you see, or in the early 21st century, we see the rise of blogs, and there's some discussion. Okay, what are blogs? Well, blogs seem more like press than not press. And so in general, there's a tendency to say, let's expand the scope and include blogs within the context of press. And academics and technologists and journalists would argue for the importance of treating blogs as press as opposed to not press. In the last 5 or 6 years, though, we see all those things that I talked about suddenly becoming press. So if you go to ExxonMobil, the coal company of the 19th century, the oil company, is now press. It has a news blog. If you go to, can I play this or not? Oh, I don't think I can play this, right? No. This is a lovely 30-second commercial on JP Morgan's site about what they're doing about the economy. It's a 30-second movie. JP Morgan also has a regular financial blog. So suddenly, Bank of America used to be not press. Maybe it's press now. The Matchmaker, which was not press, OkCupid, has a sort of notoriously well-visited blog. The car companies that are not press are a little far behind on technology, but they also have blogs. So why does this matter for the law? Well, it matters in a bunch of ways, but perhaps the most important way is in campaign finance reform. In Citizens United, one of the strongest arguments that Justice Kennedy made in striking down efforts to limit corporate speech is that he couldn't tell the difference between press and not press. He didn't know the difference between the New York Times and JP Morgan. I'm going to quote a little bit extensively from the decision. This rationale would produce the dangerous and unacceptable consequence that Congress could ban political speech of media corporations. Under the government's reasoning, wealthy media corporations could have their voices diminished to put them on par with other media entities. With the advent of the internet and the decline of print and broadcast media, moreover, the line between media and others who wish to comment on political and social issues becomes far more blurred. So I think there's many, many problems with Citizens United. I think it's a really horrifying decision, and I actually think it's, we're up here in this last panel loosely talking about power and sex and all the exciting stuff, but what it does is it really gives extraordinary amount of power to non-representative, non-accountable large institutions. We're already seeing the effects, and we're just beginning to see the effects. But what he's saying is if banks are the press and oil companies are the press and dating sites are the press, and you can't tell me a way to distinguish between these two, then I can't uphold congressional laws to try to do anything about it. So this is the puzzle I bring to you, because most of the people who raise this are people who want to allow for sort of unfettered corporate speech. I don't want that. I do want to figure out a way to protect some of the things that we care the most about the press. So who's thinking about this? Some people on the right who are trying to support these and a few legal academics. What I'd be interested in is technologists and those of you who are really engaged in thinking about creating new institutions, figuring out, well, what kind of institutions do we want to have these protections? How can we tell the difference, if it's possible, between the New York Times and JP Morgan's 30-second ad? Until we have some kind of answer to that question, we have this sort of weird situation where instead of a sentence that Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, in a real sense, what technology has done successfully is taken away the meaning from that word. So the best way to read it now is Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the